Welcome back, everybody. This is Tucker. Let's talk weather. We're breaking down a significant severe weather threat that will span multiple days. We'll break down where threats like damaging wind, large hail, and tornadoes are greatest. And even if you're not dealing with tornadoes, temperatures are changing quickly. I have a mid-March preview for you. Hey guys, welcome back in. Happy to have you here. The channel's been getting viewed a lot more recently, and that's been super encouraging. And as always, your commentary is appreciated. So if you have any weather questions or you're seeing really cool weather where you are, please let me know. I'd love to talk to you in the comments about everything going on. In the meantime, though, we have a really big severe weather threat that will span at least 3 days here, and this one's going to impact areas quite a bit farther north than the last one. So let's jump into the forecast, and I'll talk about what you're seeing right here and everything behind the storms too. In a minute here, I'm going to show you the latest Storm Prediction Center outlooks, but I want to start with, like I said, everything behind the storms, everything that's going into them to make them severe. Of course, I'm going to give you info you're not going to get on TV, so if you have any questions, just be sure to ask. Now, what you're looking at is the jet stream here, and as we move this into Thursday, the 13th, you're already seeing the jet begin to reach the west coast. Now, it's not going to bring severe weather out here, but where you see that sort of spreading out is where there's going to be a lot of rising air and certainly some heavy rain and snow out there to kick things off. Even if it's not severe weather, that will be very impactful. But it's as our jet gets into the central U.S. here on Friday the 14th that things really begin to ramp up. You're looking at Friday now in the afternoon, and we have our storm system right here where you have those closed off isobars there. And what you're also going to see is our jet right here. And that is where you have those bright colors showing up. And again, on the outside here, you have ample wind energy to create a severe weather threat across much of the Midwest. This is on Friday the 14th, but it's really just the start. I'm going to move this forward a little bit more into Saturday. You're going to see this continue to spread farther east. And as we get into the daytime on Saturday, this is still a very robust jet, and it has the potential to bring severe weather to much of the Midwest, Mid-South, even the southern U.S. especially actually the southern U.S., is in play for severe weather here on Saturday. But Saturday's not the last day we have this. Remember, it's a multi-day threat, and our jet, as long as it's in play, will keep that potential for severe weather present. Here we are now on Sunday, and you're looking at this spread out across much of the East Coast. The extent to severe weather will depend on how much instability there is, and we'll jump into that right now. After this, the jet does move on, and the severe weather threat will wane after the 16th. By the way, guys, if you haven't subscribed already, be sure to do so. I love weather. I hope you love weather, and I'll be updating you a lot more on this severe threat as we go through the next several days. We'll get to the latest outlook right after this, but I wanted to show you the instability in the air. We call this CAPE, convective available potential energy. And you really need instability to create storms. That wind energy can really do a lot on its own, but you need it to mix with some instability. And here we are on the 14th. Anywhere you're seeing these even gray colors, that's adequate instability for at least some strong storms. Those greenish blue colors, that's where you have adequate instability for some severe weather. And you can see, of course, this is originating out of the Gulf. And we have that plume of CAPE that takes it up across, basically up through the entire Mississippi River. Kind of makes it easy for us. But you can see just how far north we have instability. Now, the extent of this instability will tell us partially how high the ceiling goes for these storms. But there's a lot of wind energy. And certainly the greatest risk is likely to end up somewhere in this area here, at least in my opinion. That's where we have the greatest threat. Out here, it's a little bit more conditional. It just depends on how much instability does manage to get up there. If our storm system is stronger, and we'll watch the trends on this, then the potential will be higher out there too. Now here we are on the 15th. You can see pretty clearly here, our CAPE does not extend as far north. However, it still gets pretty far into the Midwest here, as far north as Ohio, but it is certainly greatest out here in the southern U.S., especially in states like Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and that is where our severe weather threat will be greatest on Saturday the 15th, especially in those states farther south. We have adequate wind energy and a lot of instability and the potential for some higher end storms, potentially some higher end tornado producing storms, in fact. And then we get into Sunday. Remember, that threat on Sunday is dependent on how far north the instability goes. You're noticing here that there is not so much left over for the East Coast, but again, with the amount of wind energy we have, there's certainly enough to create some severe storms. And you're seeing this, I believe, about as far north as Pennsylvania, but the ceiling, the potential for storms is lower. So I'm not expecting anything crazy. Meanwhile, those days here in the Midwest and in the Mid-South and the Southeastern U.S., those could be much higher end days. But let's get to that latest Storm Prediction Center outlook for you guys. Starting off here with our severe weather risk on Friday the 14th, you can see a level 2 out of 5 risk extending as far north as southern Minnesota and basically down to the Gulf Coast as well. The peak of this threat is going to be from around the greater St. Louis area down into southern Arkansas here. So it is a pretty big risk, a significant risk for several days out. But of course, we have the potential for tornadoes, wind, and hail. Let me show you the extent of each threat here too, and then we're going to look at Saturday and Sunday's severe weather risks, which are quite high as well. Here's one of my favorite tools for assessing severe weather. It's complicated, but bear with me. I'm going to walk you through it. We have our hodograph out here, and where you have that long curved red line, that tells you there is a lot of wind energy in the lower atmosphere, and when it's curved, there's a lot of spin too. This is saying that the potential for tornadoes is pretty significant, and we could have certainly strong tornadoes involved here. One of the less impressive things is this white dashed line. You see how there's not much space between it and the red line? That means the instability is kind of marginal, and we have a lot of dry air out here. So it is possible that if dry air wins out, we will not have storms that are as severe as they could otherwise be. But that said, there is still certainly enough instability for some storms and enough instability for damaging winds, especially given there is some dry air down here and large hail as well. But instability is lacking here. So if anything's going to lessen that threat, it is the instability, but there is a lot of wind and curving in the atmosphere. Off to Saturday's threat now. Here we are looking at the risk for Saturday. This is a severe threat that extends as far north as Lake Erie. And boy, we've been seeing lake effect snow up there recently, so that's pretty crazy, isn't it? And then we have it as far south as the Gulf Coast. The greatest risk here, as I'd mentioned before, is in the deep south and portions of the mid-south up into Tennessee. Of course, we have a level 2 risk outlined in yellow, a level 3 risk outlined in orange. This is where I believe we are almost certainly going to see an upgrade to our severe weather threat. I believe this is going to be the worst of our outbreak here, with the potential, a higher potential for tornadoes and certainly damaging wind and hail, but especially tornadoes are a concern here. Again, let's break down this threat. I'll show you what we're looking at. I'm taking you back to our forecast sounding, see if you can pick out what we were looking at last time. And if your first look was out here towards that red curved line, again, it's a long one and there's a lot of curvature in it. That's telling you there's a lot of spin and wind in the lower level of the atmosphere. Tornadoes are a big concern here, certainly the threat for strong tornadoes. Also, again, there's our white dashed line with a little more separation from the red line. Nothing crazy, so large hail isn't going to be insane, but it is a threat. More importantly, though, there's less dry air and less that could go wrong, so to speak, with this severe weather threat, meaning it's a better bet to be more widespread and potentially higher risk. And that is where I have more concern with our tornado threat and just overall severe weather threat. Certainly a damaging wind risk, as well as we do have some instability down here in the lower part of the atmosphere too. So we will be watching Saturday very closely, especially here in the south where this data is coming from. And last but not least, let's take you to our threat here on Sunday. This is for the East Coast, as far north as Pennsylvania and still down to Florida on the Gulf Coast. Just level 2 risk across this area. I believe there may be an upgrade at some point to this level 2 risk, but it certainly is not as high end as those previous days. It looks like it'll be more of a damaging wind threat as our storms become more of a line, as there is less instability. But again, let me show you the numbers and we'll talk about what you should expect right now. So here we are back to our sounding, and if you look towards where that red curved line has been, it's not as pretty this time. It's a bit smaller, there's not as much curvature in it. That tells us there's not as much spin or energy in the lowest part of the atmosphere. There is a tornado threat for sure, but it's not going to be as big as the previous days. More of a lower end threat, but still there. And in terms of instability, that white dashed line almost traces the red line. As we talked about before, there's not a lot of instability, and that means that this threat will be lower on that end of things. Especially in the lower level of the atmosphere. That tells us the damaging wind threat, it is present, especially with how much wind there is in the lower parts of the atmosphere, but it's not as high end. And there is a large hail threat, but certainly we're not looking at anything significant to that end. You'd really look for a bigger gap between the red and white line here. We just don't have that much supporting it. Nonetheless, there will be severe weather on the East Coast. It appears on Sunday. But like I said, it will not be as threatening as the days prior. Now, I also wanted to show you some AI data. It's from Colorado State. I think it's done a good job with severe weather forecasting, so I like to give you a little sneak peek here too. Here's our Friday severe weather threat. You can see it in this box here. That's what we were talking about day one. The greatest threat right along the Mississippi River there, up into southern Iowa and down towards northern Louisiana. It is agreeing with our forecast that Saturday is going to be the biggest day for severe weather. You can see especially where you have that highlighted region in black and you have that purple region down here in the south. That's basically saying there's potentially a high-end threat out there, as we were talking about. And of course, here's our Sunday severe weather threat. Not as impressive. When you're getting more of those brown colors and less yellow, that says, yeah, okay, there's a chance, but it's really not that big. I simply don't agree with it getting north of Pennsylvania, but there is going to be that more isolated to scattered threat for some severe storms, or at least strong storms on the coastline there before things finally begin to calm down again. We're also looking at impacts across other portions of the U.S., including heavy rain and heavy snow. Kind of mentioned that early in the video, but let me show you what we're looking at here real quick. And I'm going to start with the West Coast. And in fact, this is actually on the 12th that we're seeing rain reach the coastline and snowfall in the higher elevations out there. This is going to continue into Thursday the 13th. And you're seeing anywhere you got those dark blue colors, that's heavy snow. And we also have some heavy rain that's going to fall in the desert southwest here too. So your Thursday here and even Wednesday are going to be messy days in and of themselves. Not to mention, that's just one of two storm systems that'll hit the West Coast this week. The next one arrives here on Friday as severe weather begins in the central U.S. That's going to bring another round of heavy rain and snow and the potential for at least some flooding and a lot of snow in the mountains. Now, here's our severe weather system taking shape in the central U.S. Let me mention, by the way, if you're more meteorological savvy, I do not believe our low pressure system is going to be quite 978, but it will be a strong one. 978 is like a Category 2 hurricane. But here's our storm system as we get into Saturday. And we talked about severe weather. I'm going to mention, though, on the back side of this, you may be noticing some of those blue colors showing up. That's the potential for some snow on the backside. And similar to the last one, there may be heavy snow in some spots, but it looks like a more narrow corridor this time. Also worth noting, you can see our storm system centered here, but our actual severe weather out here. That's because our storm will be very mature and our front is going to be helping to initiate much of the severe weather. When you get that comma shape, that typically means, well, that always means you have a very mature storm system and likely you're going to get some kind of winter weather, severe weather, or both, especially this time of year. But there's that snow in the north central U.S. heading into Saturday, well, through Saturday and into Sunday. Severe weather, there it is in the southeastern U.S. Our severe storms reach the eastern U.S. here on Sunday and begin to move out on Monday. And by the way, even though we're not talking severe weather in the northeast, does look like there's going to be a lot of rain out here, at least I should say New England, as the leftovers from those storms, begin to rain down in that area, because what goes up must come down. Let me show you, though, our potential for precip out here over the next week. This is just an overview over the next 7 days. The numbers we're seeing out west are significant. I mean, anywhere you're seeing those gold colors, that's precip that's likely to be on the order of 6 inches or more. And we're talking about liquid precip, so rain and liquid equivalent of snow. I mean, you can see me hovering over some of the numbers here. They're just, I mean, that's crazy. But certainly that's why we have the potential for flooding. And those mountains help to exacerbate some of the heavy precip because they force the rain to fall out of the cloud as opposed to just, in the plains where it just kind of does its thing. Out here in the north central U.S., a lot of that will fall as snow, but you can see up to an inch of liquid equivalent. And then out here in the southeastern U.S., a lot of this is from severe weather, but even into the northeastern region where you got those red colors, that's a good 2 to 4 inch rainfall outlook, likely to be more isolated, like 5 or 6 inches in those isolated areas. And then up into New England, we have the potential for an inch, even up to 2 inches of rain is not out of the question. So a lot of rainfall with this system, and certainly that's going to have impacts, but also snowfall too. And I'll talk about out here out west, you can see all this snow in the mountains. That's nothing to scoff at. In fact, it's again, crazy amounts in the Sierra Nevadas out here where we may see up to 5 feet of snow. Some of those numbers are simply off the charts. The Rockies will also see up to 3 feet of snow. And I mean, we're talking just 2 huge storm systems that are going to dump in these areas. But we also have our area here in the north central U.S. on the backside of our storm system that may produce snow. A lot of these areas just saw snow this past week with the same setup. And while I'm not expecting quite as much, anywhere you're seeing those dark blue colors, so, a pretty good chunk of this area, that's where I believe a good 4 to 6 inches of snow is possible. And it wouldn't shock me if we do have some isolated totals that get closer to, that 6 to 10 range isolated, but it is possible in that part of the country. Otherwise, we are looking pretty snowless across the eastern U.S. I talked about it in some previous videos, so if you've been watching me for a while, you shouldn't be surprised. It just is getting mild out there. But we can talk about what those temperatures look like, because you better believe we're in for some volatility as this storm system comes through. So our weather here through mid-March is going to remain very volatile. These temperatures are going to be shifting a lot. And I'm going to start with our air masses here. These orange colors indicating warmer than average air, blue colors colder than average. Pretty straightforward there. Then I'll show you the actual temperatures in a moment. But let me get you into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday here. You can see just how warm it's going to be relative to average across the United States. I mean, we're talking real spring-like warmth for a lot of areas. And that's going to be a nice change from, again, what has been a relatively cold winter. But you can see out west, colder air begins to come in, that's on the backside of our severe weather threat. And as we head into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, that colder air takes over a bigger portion of the U.S., at least temporarily. It'll be more noticeable farther west because in the central U.S., warmer air is not going to be left out of the picture very long. And as we head into the following Wednesday, the 19th, then we get into the 20th, you can see we get right back to the same pattern where that warm air returns across the eastern U.S., keeping it very spring-like. Cold air, though, on the backside is going to be something that sticks around a little bit more. And actually what you're seeing here is next week, a little sneak peek at our next potential storm system. This could also be a severe weather producer, perhaps on the 20th and 21st. That's why you're seeing such a similar signal. And it's something, of course, I'm going to keep you updated on as we continue to go through March. But let's take a look at some of those temperatures at the ground. Now, as we take a look at actual temperatures across the U.S., you're going to see here on Wednesday, we are very mild, especially across the southeastern and south central U.S. Those red colors indicating temps largely in the mid-60s to the low 80s, warmer farther south. A little bit colder in the northeast. We get a taste of chillier air thanks to a low-level northerly wind. The western U.S. also mild, but not super warm. We head into Thursday. There's that warmth spreading into the Dakotas, in fact. This is the 13th. Could have highs in the mid-60s out there. Kind of cold in the northeast, kind of chilly out west as well. Friday, here's our temperature change, and you can see just how hot it gets if you're in Texas. I mean, you're seeing temps that could be in the low hundreds in southern Texas here, and we're talking 70s as far north as Minneapolis for this time of year. That's anomalous. That's unusual. In the Northeast, we have temperatures, though, that are much more typical, back to the mid-40s, and it's going to be chilly out west on the flip side. You're seeing those blue colors. Those are indicating temps largely in the 20s and even teens, especially in those mountains. We're going to move this farther, though. Remember, once that storm system comes through, temperatures begin to drop. You can see that wedge of warm air being cut back farther and farther to the east. As we get here into Sunday, it's really just going to be warm on the East Coast at this point. Back to warmth in the Northeast, though. Highs will be likely back in the mid-60s. And then here on Monday, that colder air really begins to take over the eastern U.S. But as soon as it does, we see that resurgence of warmth. That's on Monday again. The plains getting back into the 60s. So you can kind of get an idea. Our temperatures stay pretty volatile. And in case you're curious, I'll just push this forward more, and you can get an idea of where these temperatures are going to be swinging. As we head into next week, of course, the 19th and 20th, you can see once again we have that warmth shifting east, that cold air coming in on the backside as our next potential storm system likely stirs things up. So thanks for bearing with me, guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Ask your questions in the comments. Can't say that enough. I love to talk to you guys about weather, and I'm a meteorologist, so I'm happy to answer any of your questions, intricate or simple. No questions dumb. Anyway, I'll be here next time. We're going to have a very important update as we get closer to the severe weather, and I'll be sure to keep you updated right here and elsewhere on social media. So I'll see you next time. Stay safe.